rain wasn't just falling, it was driving sideways, a grey curtain of ice and water that turned the Georgia asphalt into a black mirror. I should have kept driving. I had a deadline in Memphis and a load that wasn't going to deliver itself. But then my headlights swept across the shoulder, cutting through the storm, and I saw them. Not just a broken-down bus, but a line of young men in fatigue standing in the deluge, heads bowed, shivering so hard I could see it from the cab. That wasn't what made me stop, though. It was the man in the slick raincoat screaming in the face of a kid who couldn't have been more than 19. I saw the man's hand go up, saw the slap connect with the wet smack of flesh on flesh, and saw the soldier stand perfectly still, taking it. That's when the old instinct, the one I buried deep after Fallujah, woke up. I didn't check my mirrors. I didn't think about my schedule. I slammed the air brakes, threw the rig into neutral, and grabbed the tire iron from under my seat. Someone was going to learn a hard lesson tonight, and it wasn't going to be the boys in green. Before we continue, please tell us where in the world are you tuning in from. Drop your city and mile marker. We love seeing how far our stories travel. The hiss of the air brakes punched through the roar of the storm. I killed the engine, but I left the headlights on. I wanted them to see me coming. My boots hit a puddle 3 inches deep as I swung down from the cab. The cold was instantaneous, a wet, biting chill that tried to find the seams in my jacket, but I didn't zip it up. I needed to move freely. I gripped the tire iron in my right hand, letting it hang loose against my thigh, not threatening yet, just available. I walked around the front of my Peterbilt, the massive grille looming behind me like a fortress wall. The scene on the shoulder was a mess. A charter bus sat dead, hood open, steam mixing with the rain. About 20 soldiers stood in a ragged formation near the guardrail. They were soaked to the bone, their fatigues dark and heavy with water. They looked like reservists, weekend warriors, maybe an engineering unit or supply. They didn't have weapons, just rucksacks piled in the mud. They were freezing, their lips blue in the wash of my halogen beams, but they held their line. Discipline. It keeps you alive, but sometimes it handcuffs you. The man in the raincoat, the one I'd seen swinging, was shouting at a young lieutenant. The lieutenant was trying to maintain composure, rainwater dripping off the brim of his patrol cap, but I could see the tension in his jaw. He was angry, but he was paralyzed by protocol. "I don't care what your orders say," the raincoat man yelled. He was big, thick-necked, the kind of guy who used size as a substitute for courage. He pointed a thick finger at the bus. "That rig doesn't move until the transfer goes through. You want warmth? You pay the surcharge. Otherwise, you and your little Boy Scouts can swim to Fort Benning." "Sir," the lieutenant said, his voice cracking just a fraction, "these men are hypothermic. We have a contract. You cannot abandon us on an interstate in a flood watch." "Watch me!" the man spat. He turned, looking to head back to a black SUV parked behind the bus. 2 other guys were leaning against it, muscle, hired goons in hoodies, smoking cigarettes that hissed in the rain. I stepped into the circle of light. "Problem here?" I asked. My voice was low, a rumble that sat under the thunder. The man in the raincoat spun around. He looked me up and down, saw the grease on my jeans, the flannel, the grey in my beard, the bulk of my midsection. He saw a truck driver. He saw a nobody. "Keep walking, old man," he sneered. "Official business. Doesn't concern you." "Looks like it concerns me plenty," I said, taking 2 slow steps closer, "seeing as you're assaulting military personnel on a public highway." The lieutenant looked at me, eyes wide. "Sir, please, we don't want trouble. This is a civil dispute regarding a transport contract." "It stopped being civil when he put his hands on your soldier," I said, never taking my eyes off the big guy in the raincoat. Raincoat laughed. It was an ugly, wet sound. "I'm the owner of the charter company, pal. I own the bus. I own the fuel. And right now, I own them. They didn't read the fine print on the weekend rate. Card declined. So, services suspended." "They're stranded," I said. The rain was coming down harder now, stinging my face. "Open the bus. Let them get out of the weather. You can argue about the money later." No pay, no stay, Raincoat said. He stepped toward me, invading my space. He smelled of stale coffee and expensive cologne, a salesman's smell. Now get back in your truck before I have my associates remove you. He gestured to the SUV. The two hoodies pushed off the car and started walking over. They were younger, faster looking, moving with that predatory slide of guys who enjoy hurting people. I tightened my grip on the tire iron. I'm asking you nicely. Open the bus. Raincoat sneered and shoved me hard in the chest. It was a solid shove. It would have knocked a smaller man into the mud. I just took a half step back, reset my boots, and felt that cold, familiar switch flip in my brain. The world slowed down. The sound of the rain faded into a dull hum. I wasn't Jack Mercer, the guy hauling produce to Memphis anymore. I was Sergeant Mercer, 2nd Battalion, and I was looking at an enemy. Last chance, I said. Raincoat swung. A clumsy, telegraphed haymaker aimed at my jaw. I ducked under it, my knees protesting the sudden movement, but the muscle memory holding true. I came up inside his guard and drove my shoulder into his solar plexus. The air rushed out of him with a whoosh, and he stumbled back, clutching his chest. Get him, he wheezed. The two hoodies were on me instantly. The first one, a guy with a neck tattoo and a jagged scar over his eye, lunged for the tire iron. I let him grab the end of it, then I twisted it violently, wrenching his wrist. He howled, and I drove the heel of my boot into his kneecap. There was a sickening pop, and he went down into the oily puddle, screaming. But the second one was smarter. He didn't rush. He circled. I turned to face him, breathing hard, the adrenaline flooding my system like jet fuel. He pulled something from his pocket, a telescoping baton. He flicked his wrist, and the metal snap echoed in the night. "Jack, behind you!" the lieutenant yelled. I spun just as Raincoat, recovering his breath, tried to tackle me. We hit the wet asphalt together, a tangle of limbs and grit. He was heavy, dead weight, trying to pin my arms. I tasted blood and asphalt. I headbutted him, backward, hard, the back of my skull meeting his nose. I felt the cartilage give. He rolled off me, cursing, blood pouring down his face. I scrambled to my feet, but the baton guy was there. He swung low, aiming for my ribs. I took the hit on my left forearm. The pain was blinding, a white-hot line of fire that shot up to my shoulder. My arm went numb. I dropped the tire iron. "Not so tough now, are you, fat boy?" The baton guy hissed. He raised the metal stick for a killing blow to the head. I didn't retreat. I stepped in. You don't run from a strike, you smother it. I grabbed his shirt collar with my good hand, used his own momentum, and swept his leg. It was a judo throw I hadn't used in 20 years, ugly and unrefined, but gravity doesn't care about style. He hit the ground hard, the air leaving him. I stood over him, panting, rain mixing with the sweat in my eyes. My left arm hung uselessly at my side. My chest was heaving. The soldiers were frozen. They wanted to help. I could see the desperate urge in their eyes, but the lieutenant was holding them back, his arm extended. "Hold fast! You engage, you get court-martialed. Stay in formation." It broke my heart. They were trained to kill, but they were shackled by the uniform. They had to watch an old man bleed for them because the rules said they couldn't fight a civilian unless in self-defense. Raincoat was up again. His nose was a ruin, blood streaming onto his expensive coat. He looked at his two groaning toughs, then at me. He wasn't scared. He was furious. He reached into his jacket. "You made a big mistake," he gargled. He pulled a phone, not a gun, but in some ways that was worse. "Sheriff Eubanks owes me favors," Raincoat spat, dialing with a shaking, bloody hand. "I'm going to have you buried under the jail, trucker. Assault, battery, attempted murder. And as for you," he pointed at the lieutenant, "I'm dumping this gear, right here, in the ditch." He marched to the side of the bus, unlocked the luggage bay with a remote fob from his pocket, and yanked the handle. He grabbed a green duffel bag and hurled it into the water-filled ditch. "Stop!" the lieutenant shouted, stepping forward. "Another step and I claim self-defense," Raincoat screamed, holding the phone up. "I've got the sheriff on the line right now. You want your career over, son? Try me!" He grabbed another bag, this one marked with a red cross, med kit. He threw it. It splashed into the muddy water, sinking fast. "That's medical equipment," a soldier cried out. "It's garbage," Raincoat yelled. He was manic now, fueled by pain and humiliation. "You don't pay, you don't play. I'm leaving all of it here. And this piece of trash," he pointed at me, "is going to rot in a cell." I stood there, clutching my throbbing arm. I was tired, I was hurt. And I knew he was probably right. Small-town sheriffs and local businessmen. That's a network you don't break easily. If the law showed up, I was the aggressor. I was the one who threw the first punch, technically. I was the one with the tire iron. But I looked at those kids, shivering, scared, humiliated. I looked at the med bag sinking in the ditch. I walked back to my truck. "Yeah, run away," Raincoat laughed, though it sounded wet and gurgling. "Run, you coward." I didn't get in the cab. I went to the side box. I fumbled with the latch, my left hand useless, my right hand shaking from the adrenaline dump. I got it open. I reached past the chains and the oil jugs and pulled out the bolt cutters. Heavy duty, the kind that can snap a padlock like a twig. I turned back to them. "You're not dumping anything else," I said quietly. Raincoat froze. He saw the cutters. "You touch my bus, that's felony destruction of property." "I'm not touching your bus," I lied. I started walking toward the SUV, his SUV, the one blocking the soldiers from the road, the one the heat was blasting in while these kids froze. "Hey!" Raincoat screamed. "Hey, get away from there!" I ignored him. I ignored the pain in my arm. I ignored the siren I could hear wailing in the distance, the sheriff coming to take me down. I walked to the front of his shiny black Escalade. I jammed the jaws of the bolt cutters into the grill, found the hood latch cable, and squeezed. Snap! I popped the hood. "What are you doing?" Raincoat was running toward me now. I raised the bolt cutters high in the air, looking him dead in the eye. Then I brought them down, not on him, on the battery terminal. Sparks showered the rain-soaked dark. The SUV's engine died instantly. The lights died. The heat died. "Now," I said, turning to face him, the heavy steel cutters resting on my shoulder. "Nobody is going anywhere." Raincoat stopped. He looked at his dead car. He looked at the bus he refused to open. He looked at me. "You're dead," he whispered. "You hear me? You're finished." The sirens were close now. Blue lights flashed against the wet trees, bouncing off the rain. A cruiser skidded to a halt behind my rig, followed by another. Doors flew open. "Drop the weapon!" a voice boomed over a PA. "Drop it now!" I slowly lowered the bolt cutters to the asphalt. I raised my hands. My left arm screamed in protest, but I forced it up. Raincoat was grinning, a gruesome, bloody grin. He limped toward the deputies as they approached, guns drawn. "Officer!" he shouted. "Thank God. This maniac, he attacked me. He attacked my employees. He destroyed my vehicle. I want him in cuffs." 2 deputies rushed me. One grabbed my bad arm and twisted it behind my back. I grunted, biting my tongue to keep from screaming. They slammed me against the side of the SUV. Cold steel cuffed my wrists. "Jack Mercer," the deputy read my license as he yanked my wallet out. "You have the right to remain silent." "He assaulted a federal contractor," Raincoat was yelling, wiping blood from his nose. "Look at my face. Look at my men. I want him charged with everything." The lieutenant stepped forward. "Officer, please. This man was defending us." "Back off, soldier," the lead deputy barked. He was an older guy, thick around the middle, looking at the soldiers with disdain. "I know Mr. Henderson here. He runs a legitimate business. If he says you were trespassing and refusing to pay, that's a civil matter. But this," he kicked the bolt cutters, "this is criminal mischief and assault with a deadly weapon." He spun me around. "You're taking a ride, driver?" I looked at the lieutenant. He looked devastated. He had tried to do the right thing, follow the rules, and because of that, the only guy who helped him was going to jail. "It's okay, son," I said, my voice rasping. "You just keep your men safe." "Safe?" Raincoat Henderson laughed. "They're staying right here until I see cash, and now that my car is dead, the price just doubled." The deputy didn't say a word about the extortion. He just shoved me toward the cruiser. I was done. I knew it. I'd lose my CDL. I'd lose my truck. I'd probably do a year in county. But then, over the sound of the rain and the idling cruisers, a new sound cut through the night. It wasn't a siren. It was a low, heavy thrumming, a deep, mechanical vibration that you feel in your chest before you hear it. Lights appeared around the bend, not the flashing blue of the police. Yellow marker lights, lots of them, and they weren't slowing down. A black, heavy-duty pickup truck, civilian but rigged with military-grade antennas, tore around the curve, followed by two massive Oshkosh military transport trucks, the kind they use to haul tanks. They screamed to a halt, boxing the deputies in. The doors of the black pickup flew open before it even stopped fully. A man stepped out. He wasn't wearing a raincoat. He was wearing Class A dress greens, but he moved like he was in combat gear. A single star gleamed on his shoulder. General. The lead deputy froze, his hands still on my arm. The general didn't look at the deputy. He didn't look at Henderson. He looked straight at the freezing soldiers. Then he looked at me, handcuffed against the SUV. He walked into the light, ignoring the rain. He stopped 3 feet from me. His eyes narrowed, scanning my face, looking past the beard, past the grease, past the 20 years of aging. Then his face went pale. "Sergeant Major?" he whispered. The twist wasn't that help had arrived. The twist was who had arrived, and everything was about to shift. The rain hammered against the roof of the cruiser, but outside the silence was absolute. The deputy holding my arm had gone rigid. His grip loosened, just a fraction, as if his hand had suddenly forgotten how to be a fist. "Sergeant Major," the general repeated, his voice cutting through the storm like a razor wire. He wasn't looking at the badge on the deputy's chest. He was looking at the scars on my knuckles. I took a breath, feeling the cold water run down my neck. "It's been a long time, sir, but right now I'm just a driver." "Like hell you are," the general said. He turned to the deputy. He didn't shout. He didn't bluster. He spoke with the quiet, terrifying calm of a man who commands entire divisions. "Officer, remove those restraints. Now." The deputy blinked, rain dripping from his hat brim. He looked at Henderson, then at the general, then at the two massive transport trucks idling behind the pickup, their engines rumbling like chained beasts. "Now, look here," the deputy stammered, his authority crumbling. "This man is a suspect in a felony assault. Mr. Henderson here." "Mr. Henderson," the general interrupted, turning his gaze on the man in the raincoat, "is currently in violation of Article 107 of the Uniform Code of Military Justice for making false official statements regarding federal transport, and likely facing charges for endangering the lives of United States service members." Henderson wiped the blood from his nose, his eyes darting around. He was losing control, and guys like him don't handle that well. He puffed his chest out, trying to reclaim the space. "I have a contract," Henderson screamed, pointing a shaking finger at the general. "I don't care if you're Patton reincarnated. These men didn't pay, and that animal," he jabbed his finger at me, "destroyed my property. That's $50,000 of SUV he just killed." The general didn't flinch. He just looked back at the deputy. "I am General Marcus Thorne, commanding officer of Fort Benning. The men on this bus are my responsibility. The man you have in handcuffs trained me when I was a second lieutenant in the sandbox. If he hit someone, it was because they needed hitting. Now, uncuff him." The deputy swallowed hard. The color drained from his face. He fumbled for his keys, his hands shaking. The metal clicked and my arms swung free. I rotated my left shoulder, wincing as the feeling rushed back into the bruised muscle. I didn't rub it. I didn't complain. I just stepped away from the cruiser and looked at Henderson. "You're making a mistake," Henderson yelled, backing up as the deputy stepped away from him. "I'll sue the department. I'll sue the army. I have friends in the State House." "You're going to need a lawyer, not friends," I said, my voice low. "Shut up!" Henderson lunged, not at me, but at the lieutenant. It was a desperate, stupid move, a bully trying to find the weakest link to reassert dominance. He grabbed the young officer by the lapels of his wet fatigue jacket. "This is your fault. You little snitch. You tell them. Tell them I was within my rights." The lieutenant froze, his hands up, conditioned to respect authority, even when it was screaming in his face. That was the line. Again. I didn't wait for the general. I didn't wait for the deputies. I moved. 3 strides. That's all it took to close the gap. My boots splashed heavily in the standing water, but I kept my center of gravity low. Henderson heard me coming and tried to turn, raising a hand to strike the kid again. I caught his wrist in midair. He looked at me, eyes wide with sudden realization. The arrogance evaporated, replaced by pure, primal fear. "I told you," I growled, tightening my grip until I felt the bones grind. "Nobody touches them." I stepped in, using my hip as a fulcrum. I didn't throw him this time. I slammed him. I drove him backward, straight into the side of the bus with a hollow boom that shook the metal panels. He crumpled, sliding down the wet steel, gasping for air. "Stay down," I commanded. I turned to the deputies. They had their hands on their holsters, but they weren't drawing. They looked at the general. The general just nodded at me. "Officer," I said, pointing up at my truck windshield. "You want evidence? You want the truth?" The lead deputy looked at me, wary. "What?" "My dash cam," I said. "It's running. It has a wide-angle lens. It saw him strike the soldier. It saw him throw the medical gear in the ditch. It saw his 2 goons pull a weapon on me first." Henderson, wheezing on the ground, looked up. That's a lie. It was dark." "Night vision," I said. 4K resolution, audio too." I walked to my truck, climbed up the steps, my legs feeling heavy now that the adrenaline was fading, and pulled the SD card from the camera. I climbed back down and held it out to the general. "Sir," I said, "chain of custody. I don't trust the locals to keep this safe." The general took the tiny plastic square like it was a gold bar. He handed it to his aide, who had stepped out of the truck with a rifle slung over his chest. "Secure this," the general ordered. Then he turned to the deputy. "You have your statement. You have the perpetrator. And unless you want a federal inquiry into why your department assisted in the abuse of stranded soldiers, I suggest you do your job." The deputy looked at Henderson, who was trying to crawl toward the ditch, maybe to find the baton his goon had dropped. The deputy seemed to do the math in his head. Sheriff Eubanks might be a friend of Henderson, but the U.S. Army was a much bigger enemy. "All right," the deputy sighed. He pulled his cuffs back out. He walked over to Henderson, who was sobbing into the mud. "Mr. Henderson, stand up. You're under arrest." "For what?" Henderson shrieked as the steel clicked onto his wrists. "Assault," the deputy said, reciting it flatly. "Disorderly conduct." And, whatever the general said, the soldiers erupted. It wasn't a cheer, they were too disciplined for that, but a collective release of breath. The tension broke. I leaned against the grill of my truck, the rain finally feeling cold instead of invigorating. My arm throbbed with a dull, heavy ache. The general walked over to me. He stood there for a moment, watching his men herd the freezing soldiers toward the massive army transport trucks. The heaters were already blasting in those cabs. "You look like hell, Jack," Thorne said quietly. "Feel like it, sir," I said. "Road life. It wears on you." "You disappeared," he said, "after the discharge. Nobody could find you. The boys. We worried." I looked down at my boots. I didn't want to be found. I had enough of the noise, just wanted the quiet of the highway. "Seems the noise found you tonight," he said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a challenge coin. He pressed it into my hand. It was heavy, cold metal, the division insignia. "We were 10 miles out returning from maneuvers when the lieutenant called it in. Said a civilian heavy was holding the line alone. I should have known it was you. Just did what needed doing," I said. He looked at my truck. "You got a deadline?" "Memphis," I said. "I'm already late. Dispatch is going to skin me." "Let them try," Thorne smiled. It was the first time I'd seen him smile in 20 years. "I'll write you a note." He turned back to his men. "Load up. Let's get these troopers home." I watched them go. The soldiers filed into the transport trucks, but as they passed me, every single one of them stopped. They didn't say a word. They couldn't. Regulations. But they looked me in the eye. One kid, the one who got slapped, nodded. A sharp, respectful nod. The lieutenant was the last one. He stopped in front of me. He looked at the bruised swelling on my forearm. "Thank you," he whispered. "Sir." "Not sir," I said, pushing off the truck and opening my driver's door. "Just Jack." I climbed into the cab. It smelled like stale coffee and diesel. My home. I watched through the rain-streaked windshield as the deputies shoved Henderson into the back of the cruiser. The army trucks roared to life, their massive tires churning the mud as they pulled onto the highway, a convoy of safety. I sat there for a long time, just listening to the wipers slap back and forth. My arm hurt. My schedule was blown. I'd probably have to pay for the damage to the tire iron I'd left in the mud. But then I looked at the dashboard. The little plastic hula girl my daughter gave me years ago was shaking with the idle of the engine. I put the truck in gear. The tires caught the pavement. I merged back onto the interstate, following the red taillights of the convoy for a mile before they took the exit for the base. I stayed on the main line, alone. The rain was letting up. Just a drizzle now. I turned the radio on. Some old country song was playing, static weaving through the guitar. I didn't turn it up. I just drove. The white lines flashing by rhythmically, hypnotically. The road doesn't remember what you did. It doesn't give you medals. It doesn't care if you're a hero or a villain. It just goes on. And so do I. I pulled into a truck stop 3 hours later, just outside of Tupelo. The adrenaline crash had hit me hard, leaving me feeling hollowed out and shaky. I needed coffee, black and strong enough to strip paint. I walked into the diner, nursing my arm. It was 3:00 a.m. The place was mostly empty, just a few other drivers hunched over plates of eggs, looking as tired as I felt. I took a booth in the back, away from the door. The waitress, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and tired feet, came over with a pot. She poured without asking. "Rough night, sugar?" she asked, looking at the mud on my jeans and the bruise darkening on my arm. "You could say that," I murmured, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. She put a slice of pie down in front of me. "Cherry." "On the house. You look like you need something sweet to take the bitter out." I looked at the pie. I hadn't ordered it. "Thanks," I said, my voice thick. I took a bite. It was warm. It tasted like home, or what I remembered home being before everything got complicated. My phone buzzed on the table. A text message, unknown number. I opened it. It was a picture, grainy, taken in low light inside a moving vehicle. It was the soldiers. They were crammed into the back of the army truck, huddled in blankets, thumbs up, grinning, tired, relieved grins. Below it, a text, warm and safe, mission accomplished. Thorn. I stared at the screen until it went blurry. I didn't reply. I didn't delete it. I just locked the phone and put it face down on the table. I finished the pie. I left a $20 bill under the plate. Way more than the coffee was worth, but less than the moment was. I walked back out to the Peterbilt. The rain had stopped completely. The clouds were breaking, revealing a sliver of moon. The air was crisp, clean, washed of all the dirt and the noise. I climbed up, settled into the seat, and released the parking brake. The hiss was a sigh of relief. I wasn't a sergeant major anymore. I wasn't a savior. I was just a guy moving freight from point A to point B. But tonight the load felt a little lighter. I shifted into gear and rolled toward the on-ramp, chasing the sunrise to Memphis. Thank you for watching, and if stories like this one about courage, sacrifice, and second chances speak to you, please consider subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us share more incredible true stories that honor the forgotten heroes among us.